Good morning. It is Tuesday, January 28th at 9:01 in the morning. This is the House Commerce and Economic Development Committee. And this morning we have Susan Evans McClure from the Arts Council, Vermont Arts Council with us. She would join us at the table.
I should have picked the padded seat. We'll see.
Feel
We'll see.
Spot.
No, it's okay.
Scoot around, do whatever you need to do for your comfort.
Oh, thank you. We'll see. Well, good morning, everyone. I'm Susan Evans McClure. I'm the Executive Director of the Vermont Arts Council. Thank you all so much for having me here today and for the great work that you're doing supporting Vermont's economic structures around the state, of which we're going to talk about today, how the arts and culture are part of those. Also wanted to start for a big thank you for the support of this committee over especially the past few years as we've gone through the COVID, through whatever phase we're in now of COVID recovery, and the importance of having the legislature understand that the creative sector and the creative economy are a huge part of our overall economy has been very helpful for our sector recovering. The legislature awarded $9 million in ARPA funds to the Arts Council to distribute to the creative sector in 2022. And that was the first time we were actually able to award, I'm getting ahead of myself, but that was the first time we were able to award to for-profit businesses and individuals who had LLCs as well. So that was an incredible way for us to support the field. And now that grant program is officially over, we've gotten all the final reports back and people have said things, just like what we hoped would happen with that program, that this funding saved their business. This funding allowed them to serve students during a time where they didn't have any other income, and it allowed them to be open today. And we actually saw in Vermont that we did have fewer organizations fully closed. And I think that is really because of the support that we got from the legislature to award those grants. So thank you for that. So I'm going to back up. I got ahead of myself. And I'm actually going to ask you to start by thinking about the last creative experience you had that stuck with you. Could be something you did. It could be negotiating on a bill and being creative about that. Attending a performance, making something, watching something on TV, listening to a podcast. It could be going into a store that sold local artwork. It could be walking into a new build of a home that was designed by a local architect. It could be going to see a performance of the VSO. It could be going to your kids' concert band performance. They're all coming up this time of year. So if you have that in your head, you're welcome to share it if you want to. I'd love to hear also. I don't want to take over.
And introduce yourself to Susan when you share. We can do this a little more creatively. You can introduce yourself.
Representative Herb Olson. I represent Bristol, Lincoln, Moncton, and Starksville. And my last big creative endeavor was building a poster beam carport.
That's awesome.
Big one.
That's awesome.
I mean, it's up to you all. I don't want to pressure you to share, but I will. So,
I'm Emily First, again representing Wilmington Rottingham in Halifax. Very nice to see you again.
yeah.
The last creative thing that I did was I went to a museum.
Nice.
My name is Abby Duke. I represent parts of Burlington. And if I do say so myself, dinner last night was delicious.
Anybody else want to share?
Yeah, I'm Dave Bosch. I live in Clarendon Springs, beautiful downtown Clarendon Springs, as I like to refer to it. But I serve Wallingford, Clarendon, West Rutland, the bulk of Rutland town. And I've experienced the multi-dimensional Christmas program at my grandson's school. And that was fantastic to see children of all ages doing acting, singing, the whole nine yards. Personally, a creative highlight of my career, just before I retired, I worked for the Green Mountain Finger Lakes National Forest, and we were tasked with doing the first ever of a certain kind of permit. I got to create the clause language for the fee. And right now, that annual fee for that particular project is bringing in more money than I had to manage the entire program when I retired 7 years ago. So
That's great.
that was fun. Work with auditors and appraisers and all kinds of people.
I love that. Thank you for sharing that.
Yeah, I'll go. I'm Tony Miklas. I represent most of Milton, a little bit of Georgia. I would say the most significant creative endeavor that I've experienced was a few years ago. I have a cousin of mine who has a school that he started in northern New Jersey called Carousel something or other. But what he does is he takes children with special needs, children with Down syndrome or autism, and he teaches them how to act, how to sing, how to dance. It was one of the most amazing experience I've ever had. And I'll tell you, if we could get something like this up here, it'd be great. I think it could really help.
That's great. There is a great organization in Vermont called Inclusive Arts Vermont, actually, that does support programming, not exactly, and they do a lot of schoolwork, but they support programming statewide that works with students and adults with developmental disabilities to get them involved in the arts too. And I used to be the executive director of that organization, and it's really transformational for the participants doing the art making and for everyone who's in that sphere to be part of it. Really is an incredible experience. I'm so glad you got to do that.
Yeah. Kirk White from Bethel. And creative things. I mean, probably one of the biggest things I'm always helping communities with coming up with creative projects to do to revitalize the towns. But I also write books. I compose performances, design performances, and I'm the host site for the Firefly Arts Collective, which is, I don't know if you know what it is. Yes.
But maybe I hope everyone does, because it is really great.
One day I will wow
Okay.
with my power. Now there's not the
That's great.
Edie Grant, Jericho and Underhill. I was here for Farmers Night last Wednesday.
Oh, great. First one.
Lovely. But personally, I'm working on a very creative drop shot on the tennis court.
Nice. So thank you all for sharing that. I love thinking about creativity in that way, because there's so many parts of our lives that intersect with creativity in the arts, and it could be fine arts, it could be all of the things we talked about in many ways. And the Arts Council is really lucky enough to get to intersect with all of those ways across the state. So the council is the state's arts agency. We're the state affiliate of the National Endowment for the Arts. And our mission is to cultivate and advance the arts and creativity throughout Vermont. So what we're really doing is working to build a state where artists thrive, where creativity is at the heart of our communities, and where everyone has access to the arts in their lives and education. So our work is primarily in 4 areas. We work as grant makers, conveners, advocates, and storytellers for the importance of the arts. Grant makers, right? We are most known for our grant making work. We invest private, state, and federal dollars in the arts through a transparent process that really supports artists, arts organizations, arts educators, and community. In terms of convening, we bring people together. We do a lot of trainings in support of the field to try to help artists and arts organizations do their best work. We're also the state's resource for information and advocacy for the arts to really tell the story of the power of the arts, both through our active research side, where we're really trying to document the economic impact of the arts in our state, which we'll get into in a few minutes, and also the stories that, like the ones you all experience, right, of how the arts are really revitalizing downtowns, connecting us to our communities and each other, and supporting our students in really challenging times too. So in FY24, the council awarded around $425,000. Sorry, a lot more than that. $3,247,000, a little over $3 million in funding. Grants were awarded to 131 individuals and 235 organizations and businesses in every single county of the state. So there is usually something in every town and every county related to the Arts Council, which we're really grateful to be able to do. And grants directly support artists to create new work or deepen their practice. Grants support communities to create public art connected to infrastructure projects. One of our grant making areas is actually called Animating Infrastructure. So we work directly with communities who are doing infrastructure projects to incorporate public art. We support educators to provide arts education in school settings, and support organizations to add vibrancy to their communities through arts projects as well. The council also administers 2 grant programs on behalf of the state of Vermont: the Cultural Facilities Grant Program and the Art and State Buildings Program. The Cultural Facilities Grants, both of which are part of the Capital Bill, The cultural facilities grants help nonprofit organizations and municipalities enhance, maintain, and make better their physical spaces in which creative and cultural events happen. Those are really meaningful grants because they're one of the few grant programs in the state that are actually investing in the facilities it takes to have culture and creativity in your communities. Those grants now, we've also expanded to work on some climate resilience work for buildings mainly. And we have some pretty incredible stories coming out of the last couple of years, especially of how a really moderate investment of state funding through the cultural facilities grants results in a huge amount of savings after a flood event. The Capital City Grange Hall in Berlin actually installed a sump pump in their basement, the least exciting grant work you can do. And they installed that pump, I think in 2022, 2023, the beginning of 2023. And then after 2023's flooding, they actually reached out to us and said it was the first time the building had not flooded ever after the biggest flood event we'd ever seen. And that was, it is a significant amount of money for an organization that size, but in terms of what it saved them in the long run, it's just like a drop. Shouldn't say drop in the bucket for flooding, but there you go. The other state program we manage is the Art in State Buildings program, and that's a partnership with Buildings and General Services. It's public art projects connected to capital construction projects in newer existing state-owned buildings. And with that project, we work with state employees, community members, and an artist to commission a piece of new public art. And that public art usually speaks to the either the theme of the agency, what they're working on, what's happening in the building, the physical location. They're all over the state in many state buildings. The program's actually 35 years old this year, so we're celebrating a big birthday. And after that public art is created, it becomes property of the state and is managed by the state curator's office. So it's a great partnership with BGS as well. So I will, what should I start with? Maybe I'll talk about some economic statistics because you probably hear a lot of those here, but in our sector, they're incredibly important to us and to tell that piece of our story. So we talk about the creative sector in Vermont, and that is really defined as the collective enterprises, organizations, individuals, businesses whose products and services are really rooted in artistic and creative content. It's a significant driver of our state's economy, and a big part of our work at the council is to grow our creative economy in order to grow the overall economy on behalf of all Vermonters. One of the council's main initiatives is the Vermont Creative Network, which was established by the legislature in 2016. Coming up on a birthday there too. So the Creative Network is a broad coalition of organizations, businesses, and individuals all working to advance Vermont's creative sector, which we do through research, advocacy, and networking. We know that we need the data in order to tell our story. We know that we need to tell those stories through advocacy, and we know that people need to feel connected to each other in order to learn, grow, and deepen their practice and their ability to run their businesses. So when we invest in arts, culture, and creativity as essential infrastructure, it means that we see a corresponding increase in statewide investment, resources for the creative economy, and our overall economy. So a few data points that we have a handout that is posted on the committee website now. But a few key data points that I like to mention, because it blew my mind when I started learning about this impact in terms of numbers. So according to the US Bureau of Economic Analysis, so I did not add up the numbers, but the federal government did, the arts and culture sector in Vermont contributes $1.2 billion to our state's economy every year. It's 3% of the state's GSP. You're not allowed to say GDP for states, I've been told, but and a little over 10,000 jobs. And that for us is a significant number of just economic input from the sector. We also know, because of a study that Americans for the Arts did in 2022 called the Arts and Economic Prosperity, that people not only are part of the economy by being workers in the creative economy, but participants in the creative economy are driving our economic growth as well. So that study really looked at how much money people spend when they attend performances, live events, programming. And in Vermont, we found that in 2022, there were 1.4 million attendees to nonprofit arts and cultural events in our state. 25% of those attendees were local, meaning they came from the county in which the program occurred. 75% of people traveled to get to that event from outside of the county. And local audiences spend just under $30 on top of the cost of admission every time they go to attend an event, which you can think about, right? If you go to I have tickets to Vermont Stage next week, actually. So we're probably going to pay for parking and go out to dinner, and maybe I'm actually going to go home immediately and go to sleep. But previous season would have done it 3 hours. It's going to be late. But you have that extra spending that you're doing just as part of the experience. So those are locals who are spending just under $30. Non-locals are spending almost $52 every time, and that includes the cost of hotels or travel or childcare when they leave their kids at home for that wonderful experience. So that was an incredible study because it gave us some real numbers on something that we all kind of inherently know and do ourselves, but now we have some real data to back that up. The study also created an economic impact calculator for arts organizations. So it took all the data that they collected about how much money people spend, how much money in taxes is created because of that. And arts organizations can put in the size of their organization, their overall budget, and the number of attendees they have at performances. And then it will tell you the actual hard numbers economic impact of your organization, which is a great tool. We also know that supporting the creative sector not only is great for the economy, but it also creates the communities where we know people want to work and live. And that's something we talk about a lot in the state. I know this committee works on a lot, is how do we keep people who are educated in Vermont or want to live in Vermont to live here. And we know that is by having vibrant downtowns that are really centered in the arts and creativity. Sure, off the top of your head, you can think of, even in your own communities, the ways that cultural organizations have really been anchoring your downtowns. And stories where cultural organizations have really transformed downtowns. If you think about Bellows Falls or St. Johnsbury, or really you name any town, and we can share examples of that too. This year, we've also been really focused on business development training for artists, individual artists, arts organizations, arts people who have small businesses. They are businesses, and they need to know how business works as well. And we hear again and again from them that they want to know that side of their work. I have an undergraduate degree in theater and history from McGill University and did not learn a practical business thing for the whole time I was there. So there is a huge and I have a master's degree in arts education where I also did not learn any practical business things. So we have a real need in the arts sector and opportunity to connect those artists with resources that already exist through partnerships with our economic development corporations, SBA opportunities, but also to bring them training directly. So this year we were able to offer free access to business training through a program run for an organization called Assets for Artists. It's run out of MassMocha in Western Massachusetts. And what we did was partner with the USDA Rural Development Grant. So the Arts Council provided some of the money, the USDA-RD provided the rest, and we were able to offer free trainings to actually everyone in Vermont who wanted to participate in that. We just wrapped up the first session that was available, and we had an incredible turnout of Vermont artists, not surprisingly. There were 76 Vermont artists who participated. And one artist, we just got some feedback from that, and one artist said, I'm so used to having to figure out everything by myself as a freelancer, and it's a relief to have some guidance. Another reported that this was a truly amazing opportunity. My band is about to launch a crowdfunding campaign, and we've been desperate for exactly this information. It was so well organized and easy to follow. So we're hoping to have continued support from USDA-RD to offer these free workshops in the future. Actually, now every state, I shouldn't say this so confidently, I believe every state in New England now has access to them. I'll have to check on New Hampshire, but that doesn't matter to us. Vermont has access to them. And we know that these business trainings are going to have a real impact on these businesses and individuals being able to have a strong future in this field. The other area that we have been focused on supporting in the past few years is film and creative media. Vermont is one of few states in the country who does not provide any financial support to our film industry for film production. Some of you who were here last year have heard me talk about this. And while we know that our state is never going to offer the level of tax incentives that are going to be competitive with our neighboring states like Massachusetts, New York, Quebec, neighboring countries, and we also are not advocating that we should do that, but we do know that a small investment from the state will really yield big returns for this important industry. And when we think about film and creative media, yes, maybe it's Beetlejuice coming to Corinth, but that is one small example of a large production. What we're actually looking at in terms of the film and creative media industry are the small businesses who need access to video production services, the general stores who need to have an Instagram page that has short videos on them and don't have the capacity to do that. What we're looking to do is create the backbone for our small businesses that exists here in Vermont that they can tap into. And the industry is really telling us that what they need is a very simple, centralized resource where a database where everything can be publicly available of what the media, what the talent is, what the assets are, what the equipment is, what the job opportunities are, just to make it like a little bit easier to do your work here. We'd also love to have someone to answer the phone when someone calls and has questions about filming in Vermont. We want to be able to say, talk to this person, and they will tell you how to get the permits, who to talk to in which town. So we are proposing a small investment in film and creative media to develop that database this year. You did not ask me here to talk about that today, so I'm just going to touch on that and would love to come back and go deeper on that if you'd like to talk more about it in the future of the session, because we do believe it is a big part of Vermont's overall workforce development plan of how we're training and keeping the people who are trained here to do this work. So you may be wondering, how does the Arts Council work in terms of your budget and structure? So, interesting day to start this conversation. Excuse me if I'm like sweating a little. Anyway, the Vermont Arts Council is the only state arts agency in the country that operates as an independent nonprofit. So the National Endowment for the Arts gets their funding from the federal budget. 60% of their funding goes directly to 56 state and territorial arts agencies, of which we are one. But we are a quasi-state agency created in statute in 1965. So we're marking our 60th anniversary this year. I should really look up what the 60th anniversary present is so I can start talking about it. Diamond. Okay, not against it. We'll see. Ethically grown diamond, maybe lab-grown diamonds. We'll take some lab-grown diamonds. So the council receives the majority of our funding from the National Endowment for the Arts and the state of Vermont. The NEA requires that state governments provide a one-to-one match of those federal dollars. So our general fund allocation enables the Arts Councils to secure substantial federal funds each year that are distributed to organizations, schools, and communities. Because we're an independent nonprofit, we are able to do private fundraising as well, which we do, and supplements our ability to give out grants across the state. We are extremely careful in a small state that we are not in competition with arts organizations. So we have a really defined fundraising strategy that's instead focused at private donors who are interested in granting out funds to multiple artists. Can be a little complicated to grant funds directly to artists. We are definitely the experts in that. And we are partnering with some wonderful private philanthropists who support that work and want to kind of add on to what we're able to do in terms of the pool of funds that we're able to share. So in just to put our cards on the table with the news this morning. So we are following closely any proposed changes that are happening from the federal government. Right, there was it's hard to keep up with every moment, but yes, last night it was announced that there was a memo from the Trump administration saying that all federal assistance funds were to be frozen, and grants and all federal grants and assistance were to be frozen. There are a lot of steps between what that means, what's legal about that, what it means, and how it's going to play out. So today, that being very fresh, I have absolutely nothing that I can say committedly will impact Vermont. But I do know that if it continues for long, it will both have an impact on the Vermont Arts Council receiving our federal funding for this year that has already been allocated to us. And also will have an impact on arts and culture organizations across the state who really rely on federal funding for their continued operations. And some of that is direct funds from the National Endowment for the Arts. They do their own granting process as well, and Vermont organizations receive funds through that. Some of it is funds that come from other federal agencies, whether that's funds, the USDA RD funds that I just talked about, a lot of other funding that does support community development that the arts and culture organizations across our state are doing. So it is a really vital resource for the state, and it's not the only thing that floats any of our organizations, but it is an important piece of the pie that makes up the funding structure for Vermont's arts and culture organizations. So in terms of our budget for FY26, what we expect to happen, and we have been advised, is, as always, to plan for stability. I love planning for, you got to plan for stability and be ready for whatever is to come. But in terms of what that means for us is that our federal allocation we expect will be around $1,070,000-ish next year. And really securing 100% of these federal funds is really vital to Vermont. We believe that we're in the governor's budget for a little under that amount. So we'll be working with the legislature to fully match our federal award when we are notified of what that is going to be. I hesitate to bring this up because I don't want to go too far down the road of what may happen with our federal partners. I do feel it is worth saying that while we rely on this, the way we have partnered with the legislature usually is that we'll say, this is what our federal amount is. In order to receive that, we need that 1-for-1 state match. If we're in a situation where that federal amount is significantly decreased, it will be vital that we receive the original amount from the state so that we're able to continue these important operations of our arts and cultural organizations and individuals across the state. So if that federal amount goes down, we really would advocate strongly for steady support from the legislature to ensure that this sector continues to thrive in our state, no matter what chaos is happening around us. And we know that the arts are actually not, the arts in Vermont are a community and economic development issue. They are not a political hot button issue in Vermont. They're something that really drives our local economies. And that's where we want to stay focused. And we always do our work. So what is the work that we're going to focus on? So our top priorities in the coming fiscal year are really to help stabilize, for someone who talks about the arts all the time, I actually tend to be really boring. We just want to stabilize and sustain, even though there are amazing things that the arts does. But our focus is really on stabilizing and sustaining the creative sector through whatever challenges we're experiencing in the current moment. We know that many small nonprofit organizations in Vermont are really struggling. They're, and I'm sure you've heard from them in this committee of the vital economic and community roles they play, and then the struggles they have to get the funding they need to operate in that way. So our work is really about supporting them, both supporting individual artists to develop the skills and financial strategies they need to put their creative businesses on firmer footing, and to provide cultural organizations and creative businesses with the resources they need to build resilience, and to revitalize our downtowns and our communities through the arts. We have such great stories of that around the state, and it's something we don't want to go back on. We want to keep working on that because we know it works, and we know that it's what our state needs to really develop our communities. So at the Arts Council, we continue to be committed to supporting an inclusive, diverse, and accessible artistic landscape in Vermont. We're really committed to leading from our values and responding with flexibility to the ever-changing state, local, national landscape. And really staying laser focused on how do we do that in a way that benefits Vermonters. Strengthening Vermont's creative economy is not only necessary and good for humanity, but it's good for our economic bottom line as a state too. There are a few things that we can talk about that have the amazing social and human impact of the arts, but also the hardcore numbers of economic impact of the arts. And I know that we all agree that Vermont and all of us really need arts and arts opportunities that connect us with ourselves, with each other, with our communities, really now more than ever, to help us see what's possible. It's easy for us to get kind of, there's a lot of complexity in the world all the time. And I think it can be easy to get kind of mired in that. But I think the power of the arts is the ability to help us see what's possible in the future and to build and grow together. And that's what we really want to stay focused on and support for all of us across the state. So I'm happy to, I did not wear a watch, so I don't know what time it is, but I'm happy to take questions and or answer any questions or talk more about anything you have in mind.
We have about 20 minutes, so we
Okay.
have plenty of time.
Great.
So yeah, we can go to questions. I don't know. Anybody has questions? No question? Go ahead, Bert.
Yeah, do it.
So basically, your grant, there's a grant. So how are those grants received, I guess, and how are they reviewed? How do you make judgments on all that stuff? You might have, I don't know, maybe a lot more applications than you have.
We do.
So
We
I'm
always
just
do.
curious about, the general, structure of the nitty gritty of grant program.
Yeah, that's a great question. Thank you. So most of our grants are an open application process with all the information on our website and a series of deadlines. We have worked really hard over the past couple of years to simplify the application process as much as possible. I'm sure many of you at the table have applied for federal grants before, and that is a beast. So we have certain federal rules that we have to follow with our NEA funding. So we obviously work within those and try to be as simple as we can in the process. So once you fill out your application and apply, we have, and we actually, our grants officers try to be as hands-on as possible with that application process. Yesterday, we had a grant deadline yesterday, actually, for our artist development grants. And I believe our grants officer was fielding some questions late into the evening from people who were doing some last minute applications, which we all know happens. We also work really hard to ensure that people know about the grant opportunities. That's a big part of our kind of communications team's work. What we never want to do with any federal or state money is to concentrate those among the organizations that have giant development departments and resources. We know those folks need support too, but we want to ensure that our funds are spread out across the state to everyone. So once you apply, we use a grant panel process. So every grant has a panel of reviewers who are people they're usually made up of folks who are artists who work in those disciplines. Maybe they've received grants in the past from us, so they're a previous grantee, or they work in the field in some way. But obviously none of them are applying for grants in this cycle. They review the grants through but they have a series of questions that they're reviewing for, kind of a review rubric that they use. We also follow the NEA's rules of reviewing grants they call it artistic merit. So we are reviewing under that definition that they share with us of what that means. And then through that panel process, they kind of rank all the grants, and then it's a point system usually. So the ones with the highest score are the ones we're able to fund within the amount of money we have. You bring up a very important point that we are not anywhere near able to fulfill the need that we have and the requests that we get. We have, our creation grant program is our most competitive grant program. We received a couple hundred applications and we were able to fulfill 22 of those. And that grant program half of it is funded with private funding too. So that's kind of the most competitive grant program, but none of them are anywhere near the ability to grant 100% of them. And actually, as we've become better at doing outreach, we're having more people apply, which is great. So there's more applicants, but our percentage that even as we grow our pool of funding, we have more applicants, and the percentage that we're able to fulfill is kind of about the same depending on the program. That is one of the things. We are just wrapping up a strategic planning process, a statewide strategic planning process. So over the summer, we did a series of listening sessions across the state and virtual ones, and we tried to get everywhere that we could. And one of the things people asked was just that question. It's really, how do you make decisions when there is a limited pool and you're told, no, you didn't get the funding? It's not a great feeling. You work hard I have been told no for plenty of grant applications, and it's not nice. So what we always try to do with that is, even if you get a no, we try to make it an opportunity for you to access other resources too. So while our grants officers are really focused on running, these grant programs, getting this federal and state money out into Vermont, if you get no, we try to say, and here's some ways you can improve your application for next time. Here's some partner resources that may be available to you. We work in close partnership with the Division for Historic Preservation as well at the state. So they offer some grant programs. We're actually going to be doing we call it a grants roadshow, but it's probably not the official name, but tour around the state for grant seekers. So folks who want to apply. So I think that starts in March of this year. And we do that in partnership with Division for Historic Preservation. So Caitlin Corkins on their team will come and also talk about the opportunities from VDHP, about the barn grant programs and some of the downtown tax credit programs that they offer. And we try to ensure that we're both getting our money out the door transparently and clearly into everyone, but also helping to connect with other state resources. That's something I'm very kind of nerdy passionate about. I'm actually really impressed by how much Vermont does to support businesses and nonprofits, but often the challenge is the kind of communications piece of how do you know it's there? How do you know what the opportunities are? I'm thinking about even our Sister States Committee. We've been learning about, there's so many people doing amazing things, and it's not frequent that there is a central communication strategy from a statewide perspective. So we try to do that both for our resources that we're able to offer, but also for others. This year we actually started in the fall, just a monthly newsletter that we're calling Resource Roundup. And it's just a list of all of the state grants that are open, our grants, partners, national opportunities, where we're trying to be a clearinghouse to support, to help people know what's possible. That was a longer answer than you probably wanted.
Very, very good.
Thank you.
The roadshow you just spoke of, is that simply marketing, or do you also bring along the expertise to actually start people down the grant application track? Because that can be burdensome, especially for
Yes.
those who are new to it.
Yep. So we have our grants officers and our programs team go out to those, and they will really walk you through the application, both talking about the opportunities that there are, kind of what the grants are, helping you. We encourage people to bring their ideas for their project so that we can say, oh, that's good for our arts project grants, or that might be better for an artist development grant. So you can understand where you fit. And then we walk people through the application process. And the goal with those really is also just to put a face to kind of nameless state bureaucracy. So that, if you do have a question, it's not like calling the Big Scary Arts Council. It's like, oh, I'm going to call Michelle because I met her and she has also worked here for 35 years and knows everything. And she's the person to go to. So that's a big part of that project too.
I'm interested in the business development programs that you're talking about. And I can imagine that the typical artist is not used to seeing what they do as a business. And so sort of the training behind that, is there sort of future expansion plans and sort of tangential to that too? Is like any kind of a formal sort of peer network where, regional artists get together and so they can kind of work together on things, just that. Because the other piece I can imagine is in our kind of rural state, there's a loneliness aspect to it of like, individuals kind of going about their arts business on their own. Especially I'm thinking about not so much organizations as individuals.
Yeah. It's, I used to always talk about the potters on the dead end roads, right? Like we all know those. And I will say I was biking in the islands last summer and I was like out in the middle of nowhere biking around by myself. And I saw a little sign that said like so-and-so pottery. And he was on a dead end road. I was like, this is my guy. So I almost went to like bike down and be like, hi, I talk about you all the time. But he and she and the dead end potters are out there. And that is a big, it's a big need that we heard from people, is the desire to come together and not actually just come together. We heard this from our strategic planning sessions. People are don't want to come together to just hang out. They want to come together for purposeful learning, connecting, deepening your practice. So we brought back this year, kind of the first time after COVID, the Vermont Creative Network convening, which was in Bellows Falls. We sold out the event with 200 people attending, and it was a full day of trainings and workshops. And we're hoping that'll be a program we do every other year. And the intent with that is that's kind of our big statewide event where we get people together. We are in the process, and this actually is one of our actions of our new strategic plan, is really looking at how to develop those regional networks, both for individual artists, but also for arts organizations. There is, I would say, more turnover now than there has been in leadership of nonprofits in Vermont, especially in rural areas. So as we're putting new people into those positions, they also need training and support. We also have a real need in Vermont. Man, I made it this long without saying the word accountant. We do not have enough accountants in the state of Vermont. It may have come up in this committee before, but it is hugely problematic for nonprofits and for small businesses and for individual artists. Often there actually are resources available. I'm just going to say positive words. There are federal grants available, and even if you get them, they can be so complicated to manage because you don't have the accounting or financial oversight that you need, that it's really holding back small businesses and nonprofits. The specific trainings from Assets for Artists have been great. We've worked with Assets for Artists. We've also worked with the Vermont Small Business Law Center out of Vermont Law School, offering some legal training for which they do workshops too, because we find that people have what seem like basic questions, but not something you learn about, right? Like one of the biggest questions we get is, how do I incorporate? Should I be a nonprofit? Should I do an LLC? Should I be sole source proprietor? Like, what does those things mean? So we've been trying to fulfill that need too. But it is because we had such uptake of the Assets for Artists program this year, it's definitely something we want to continue offering. And we're looking at how to fundraise for more kind of cohort-based opportunities to learn across the state too.
If I may interject a personal note here at this point, that kind of business acumen being available is needed across all kinds of
Mhm.
industry in this state. My
Yes.
daughter has set up her own business, and it wasn't until her third year where she was able to tap into somebody who was able to sit her down and work her through QuickBooks and some of those kinds of things, that she was able to manage her economics and business side much better, but do so and was able to gather the data she needed to go to the next level of being considered for larger contracts, larger projects and all, because now she has the financial data that she can demonstrate, if this is what really happens here in my business. It's not just, index cards in a shoebox or something like that.
So just tomorrow morning, we're doing Small Business Day. And so we will get some
The tee up.
some of this information there. And I'm assuming that you're working with the Small Business Development Center with some of this?
We have in the past, yeah, especially during COVID and connecting them to those resources as well. And I think what you were saying, Abby, about the artists not seeing themselves as businesses, that's actually a lot of our work too. It's just that perception shift of both. I've been accused of being an arts cheerleader, but also to be remind people that they're businesses, that business is not a bad word for artists. This is something we're actually looking at across New England too. I work a lot with the other state arts agency directors of New England, and in Massachusetts, they have started, I think this is going to be fascinating actually, a project looking at all of I think it's the Boston area higher ed programs that offer arts degrees, and then assessing if there's any business training offered as part of those degrees. Because we all know what we know, but they're looking for that data so that they can go back to those schools and say, you're actually doing a huge disservice to our local economies to pump people out who are not qualified to be able to run a business, and you're telling them that they can't. So I think that's a regional shift that we're partnering with other states on too, to see how we can support that. And Assets for Artists is great in that way because they are serving all of New England. So there are some, of course, Vermont specific issues to us, but a lot of these issues are really just kind of business basic things. The Arts Council used to offer a program actually in the 80s, I believe, that was this business basics program for artists. And it was a cohort. And actually a friend of mine's dad is an artist, and I bumped into him at a craft fair, and he was selling paintings. And he said that the only reason he was an artist now, a working artist, was because he took that program in the 80s. And people in his cohort are still some of his closest friends who are artists. And his wife, kind of a family friend, pulled me aside and said, yeah, he was just chopping wood out back for years until he did that program. And look at him now. So it really, it does make a big difference. And it's something we're really committed to continuing, because we know, as I just said, we're not fulfilling all the need for grants, and we never will. We will never be able to match all the need in terms of grants. So a portion of our work is also really focused on training. So we're not going to be the ones paying for it forever, so we're not going to be the ones paying 100% of it, but we want to use some of the funding we have to train people to kind of get better at it on their own too.
Emily?
I just want to say I'm a huge fan as a working artist. I've lived in a number of different states, and not every state is set up like this, that has a functional state agency that you can go to and be like, hey, I need help. Can you help me? So it is a huge thing, because stepping out on your own and hanging a shingle is no small feat. I was wondering if you could say more about the marketing that you do to get the word out to folks.
About our grant opportunities, or just
opportunities for both artists and the organizations. I know a lot of folks in the state know you kind of just like by name and reputation, but
yeah, I think it is. So that is another thing that came up in our strategic planning work, and something we know is that our focus moving forward is really going to be about how do we do a better job of communicating what the opportunities are, where the trainings are, and being much more public about it. There's an interesting thing with the Vermont Arts Council, because we're a pretty behind the scenes organization. We're not the one, many of our staff are practicing artists, but we're not the ones creating the work. And I'll just be really honest that my entire background up to this has been working in museums and performing arts centers to make the stuff. Like I made the programs, I did the education work. And this is not that. We're behind the scenes. We're helping other people. And so in a really a vital supporting role. So when you're in that vital supporting role, we're always trying to strike that balance between kind of making it about us versus making it about the people doing the work where the spotlight should be on them. And we also need to talk more about the opportunities that we have. That's part of the work we've been doing in the past year, focusing on the traveling around the state, the grants roadshows, the live programming, so that we can really amp that up in terms of reaching artists, because we do hear that a lot, right? From artists who don't feel connected, and we want to make sure that we're getting to all of them and letting them know about the resources that are available. And even just like reminding them that they're part of a group here in Vermont who wants them to be part of this group is really important too. So it's a huge focus for us moving forward that came out of our strategic plan, and one that we're really going to be doubling down on, because I know there's a little more work to do in that area.
Can I just say one more? Sure. I also just want to point out that the creative sector has an interesting, while it's definitely tied to tourism, the other side of it is very much tied towards creative manufacturing. And it has an interesting growth opportunity for our state, which I'm excited about.
Let me do one quick thing and then I will. So I just wanted to, I don't want to lose this thread. When you're talking about training artists as, you know, how to do more of the business pieces, right? Like anecdotally, we hear about that, but the data from those trainings and how those business success goes forward is going to be incredibly helpful for our committee and for the legislature if we ever do need to provide funding for that program. So I just wanted to make sure that you're capturing data.
Yes, we are working with Assets for Artists on tracking that, but it's good to know too that that is also part of not only telling people about the opportunities, but being a little more vocal about the wins that we have too is an important part of it. I think a lot of state agencies, right, we get so caught up in like, there's so much to do and we're so tiny that you forget that the final part of like reporting back on what you did and talking about how it worked. And that part is often left out. So it's one that we are also focused on. And yes, we'd love to talk more about that as we wrap up that program with them.
Dave first and then Tony.
Couple of questions about the National Endowment for the Arts funding. That federal one, you said it was a 1-to-1 match. Now, if for some reason the state share falls short, we lose access to that money? Okay, now let's say we do get it all. Can we in turn, statewide and inside the state, leverage some of that? Are there opportunities to do local area matching grants to that pool of money then that we have to manage?
So interesting. Yeah. So the NEA funding very explicitly has to be matched by state general appropriations funds.
Okay.
So there could be local communities that want to raise money and say, talk about it, but it's not a requirement, and it kind of it's not necessary to get that federal funding.
I'm just
Did I answer that right?
opportunities
Yeah.
to leverage I'm thinking of big community events like Art in the Park in Rutland, which is a big draw
Mhm.
to our community. I don't know what kind of local support is. I know that Chaffee had, spearheads everything. Just curious if there's a multiplying effect there, or if it's the one and done. But thank you.
Yeah.
It's just a suggestion. I've worked with some of the state programs in business development. I'm a business owner myself. And there was one, and as a condition of getting the help, they said I needed to continue to work with them over the next 6 months, year, or whatever. Just as a suggestion, maybe you could, I don't know the legalities, but if you're awarding grants to these people, perhaps there's a way to put a requirement in of saying, okay, well, you need to report to us some data, at least for the next year or something like that.
Yeah, that was actually a really interesting thing that came out of the COVID funding, because it was really based on, we saw a lot of 990s for organizations, and there was some financial reporting that kind of gave us a really interesting picture of where organizations stood financially. So yes, that's definitely something we want to, all of those long-term partnerships, right? So that you can see the impact over the long term is really vital. And yeah, definitely something we should look into. Good idea. Thank you.
I'm going to just make a suggestion and also do the link for it. But there is something called Data Arts that my organization is plugged into. Do you know about them?
Yes, the SMU Data Arts Group. Yes.
really handy.
Yes, they have a lot of really good data. Thank you.
Really good data, and having something that's sort of similar that others can kind of
Mhm.
as they're doing their year-end reporting.
They also, SMU Data Arts also did, they report on the like most vibrant arts states and counties and communities. And there's always states, communities in Vermont that are always on their list. And we actually, Vermont as a state, they did a state ranking of arts vibrancy, they called it. And Vermont was the highest, I think we were like 13, I should know this. We were the highest ranking most rural state, which I thought was really interesting. Because that's a piece of our work too, that we're always focused on is Vermont is a very rural state. And there is often when we talk about the arts in America, you think about major cities, right? And the creative opportunities in major cities. But there's a great nationwide kind of coalition who's looking at rural arts right now, and which I'm part of that coalition to really be highlighting some of the stories of the importance of the arts in rural communities and rural education and rural economic development, and how that is a different approach than you would do for a major metropolitan area. And being able to have the data and stories and ways to talk about that impact is really important. And SMU's Data Arts is doing, they might have dropped the SMU. They might just be called Data Arts. Oh, okay. I call them SMU Data Arts, but.
Well, thank you so much for being
Thank you.
here today. Look forward to having more conversations as the
Yeah.
summer goes on, and we appreciate everything that you do for the state.
Thank you. And I will just a plug that February 12th is going to be Creative Sector Day in the State House. So we're going to be doing some fun things. There will be circus performers. And it should be a really fun day overall too, and a way to highlight the great work that this creative sector does for all of us. So.
I'll try and just perform myself.
Oh, nice. Thank you. Thank you very much. Enjoy the rest of your day.
So committee, we're on the floor at 10 and then we have caucuses and lunch, and then the governor is in for the budget address at 1. So this is our last meeting in committee today. We start tomorrow morning next door at the pavilion. So we're meeting there for small business, and I believe it's room 267, but it's somewhere up in that.
Well, no.
That's 9 o'clock, so.
It's on the
9 a.m.
agenda, yeah,
And it's
266.
joint with the Senate.
Just to inform the rest of the group, I've informed Mike and Grace, I will not be physically present tomorrow in Rutland. Hopefully it'll be early enough that I'll be able to at least listen in on the Zoom link for the bulk of things, but one doctor that doesn't have Monday office hours. My apologies.
No need to apologize. All right, well,
And it is room 267.
267, great. Okay, then I think we are.